What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Design Therapy, your creative community and outlet for all things inspirational, experimental, and finding that artist within. I'm your host, Cassie Patterson, a creative designer and brand strategist in Nashville, Tennessee. And on this episode, I have a talented UX designer and instructor, the host of podcast Design Today. Please give a warm welcome to Dillon Winspear. Hi.
Thanks, Cassie. Thanks for having me here. Appreciate it.
How are you doing today?
Just fantastic. Busy day, but it's been a good one. So, I'm happy to be here.
I love that. Well, let's just jump right in and tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, and kind of like where you come from in the industry.
Sure. I mean, that's it's a long question. Let me try and shorten or abbreviate that for you.
Give me your elevator pitch.
Elevator. Oh, I've never tried to do my career in an elevator pitch. That'd be fun, though. So yeah, I'm a UX creative. I've been in the user experience design space for the better part of 10 years, but that was not my intended career path. I actually graduated with a degree in marketing, and out of school, I took a job with a internet marketing agency. We were doing search engine optimization. We were doing pay-per-click advertising. Our little agency started offering landing page design and branding design and website design, and I was eager to throw on that hat at the little agency that we were at. And one thing led to another. I just caught the design bug and started applying marketing principles to design. And by that, I mean, I'm not going to get into a room and argue with people over what color to pick. I just said, fine, we'll do them both.
Are you sure you don't want to do that?
I learned that real early on. What's funny is I actually paused my business degree when I was doing this internet marketing agency. And I said, let me pause it real quick. Let me take a couple design courses while I'm still in school. And I would go into these art classes and they would throw together, a website homepage or something like that. And my marketing brain would just be like, no, why are you doing that? There's no call to action. What are you doing?
You're doing it all wrong.
And they were pretty, don't get me wrong, they were pretty, but the marketing brain in me was going like, oh, that's not going to convert any user. That's where I would go with it. But I learned that I didn't want to argue over pretty colors. I didn't want to argue over, what font to use on it. So I just said, we'll just try them both. We'll A/B test it. Or, we're developing in a new brand, so let's run a focus group. Let's do a couple surveys. And I was just taking marketing principles and applying it to design. And one thing led to another. I learned that was what user experience design is. And 10 years later, here I am.
I love that you've had such a diverse career, coming in and changing it and evolving it and actually knowing what you want to pursue. Like a lot of designers don't have that vision of like where they want to go in their career. They're just kind of like petering along. Did you always have like a clear vision, or did it kind of just hit you one day and you're like, this is like kind of more of the path I want to go? Or was it just like conversations like, I don't want to fight somebody?
No, and that's such a great question. I don't know if I've actually like analyzed it or assessed what actually took place in that journey. I knew that I actually thought I was going to be, a serial entrepreneur. That is what I thought my career path was going to be. I was going to create businesses and just churn out business ideas until something caught fire. Yeah. And, it was fun, but then I guess maybe I was just so cheap, or maybe I was trying to do things on a budget that I was like, well, I can't hire a designer to do all this design work, so I'll figure that out myself. And so I got into the design world and realized, I really do like this though. And there's an art magic that I enjoy, that I've always enjoyed. And I enjoyed kind of bridging the gap between business and design. And that's ultimately like where my career started, was just trying to be able to take business experience and apply it to the quote unquote design eye, and just married those two things together.
I love that. Like it is such a hard way to kind of blend two, because I know for me, we were speaking earlier, I always wanted to, combine video with being creative and finding a new outlet for that. I feel like a lot of creatives get stuck in a rut of, they end up being in the same career for 10, 20 years and they never evolve, just because they don't have that clear vision. Where do you start to align yourself to what that vision is for yourself? Like, do you just start testing and trying things, or like, how did you ultimately start doing that for yourself?
Yeah, and I'm actually an advocate for trying many things, right? I don't think you have to have your career path figured out in your 20s. And, I definitely didn't. Yeah, I definitely didn't.
I didn't either.
And, you know, like I said, marketing was my thing. That's what my degree was in. And I thought I was going to go into internet marketing. So I've thoroughly studied myself in pay-per-click advertising and ClickFunnels and landing page optimization. Um, and then once I started throwing on this design hat, I ended up transitioning to a different company. I took on a different design role, but I was also a social media manager. And
Mhm.
I learned how to do social media advertising through a social media genius. And this was, you know, we're talking 9 years ago, and Facebook pages were all the big thing. And I
Mhm.
was taking now my pay-per-click advertising experience with my design experience and building Facebook pages.
Yeah.
And, you know, in my first 9 months doing social media, we built a Facebook page from 0 to 130,000 fans
Wow.
for a penny, basically a penny a fan. And that, you know, is paid advertising. But again, it was just the evolution of, we did pay-per-click advertising, we did design. Now let's apply a design to social media.
Mhm.
And eventually we got into more robust website design, more branding design. And again, I took another step to mobile design
Yeah.
with a different marketing or a different design agency. And, you know, it slowly evolved and brought me here today. I didn't plan on being here 10 years ago. It just evolved. And I think I was willing to ebb and flow with what happened.
And that's such an important aspect of it, is being able to be open and letting go, like, of the self and the ego, and allowing yourself to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Is such an important aspect. With technology evolving as it is, we're constantly changing. How do you kind of keep up with the trends and combating, something's going to change in 4 months, 6 months, 12 months. We're ever changing a society. How do you start combating that?
Well, that's a good question. I am not, I struggle to keep up with trends. And, you know, when I was training some UX designers early on in their careers who maybe didn't go to design school,
Mhm.
they always had a great eye for what looked good and what didn't look good, but they didn't understand, because of the lack of schooling, the principle behind why it was working and why it wasn't working.
Mhm.
And so, you know, as they started to learn the principles, they could kind of foresee the next trend, or they could figure out what was working in the next trend. But it all came back to a foundation of principles. And design principles have been, you know, cut in stone for as long as we can remember. And so I don't think like any trend is coming up with something, you know, completely out of left field. It's just building off of principles that are working and applying the principles in new ways. And I think if you understand the foundation, which are those principles, uh, I don't, it's for that reason that I don't try and keep up with trends.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, well, how do you like get into your creative zone? There's so many different ways to like start your day, and keeping up with all of these tasks or trends or whatever. Like, what do you do to get like yourself in that creative mood? Do you have a routine?
Routine. Do I have a routine? So I do seek out a lot of inspiration, right? You know,
Yeah.
Instagram's a place that I love to seek out inspiration. I follow people like you. I follow people, others that, you know, that are just posting constantly and get the creative juices flowing, right? Um, so I think there's a place for that. But when it's time for like pen to hit paper, like for me, it's like either throw on good music or throw on a podcast and go to town. Like I think I went through like 3 Joe Rogan podcasts in one night last week,
Oh,
just because I had a dozen logos that I needed to turn out. And, you know, Rogan podcast could last up to 2 hours. That's like 6 hours of entertainment for me to design to.
hmm
What
He's
do you do? What do you do?
me. I
Yeah.
do a lot of different things. I love to go on a nature walk to kind of get my mindset
Uh-huh.
right for the beginning of the day, because if I don't, I will be a crazy person and not very happy to be around.
Do you do that every morning?
I try to at least
Good for
15,
you.
20 minutes. And then I'll do an hour in the evening if time allows. I sometimes out walking at night. It's not always great, but I'm in the
Sure.
city.
Sure.
But either having like a sketchbook on hand, or
Mm-hmm.
drawing inspiration from things around you. I'm a very observational person,
Mm-hmm.
so if you are like at like a coffee shop, or sitting at the mall in the lobby area and watching people, watching things, looking at what is being put up, design wise, artwork, it's just being very observant and looking at a perspective that's not your own, and
Yeah,
trying to capture those ideas and just kind of pocket them for later. Because everything is like the physical world is very, it inspires me every single day to produce
for
what my work
sure.
is.
I used to say, inspiration comes when you seek to be inspired, right? You could walk down the street in Nashville and not think two things of it. But if you want to see like what's around you and be present in that moment, there's so much around you that could inspire the next thing that you jump into. And again, I think it always just comes from having that mindset of like, I'm looking to be inspired. What's around me that can inspire me?
Exactly. So with speaking of Joe Rogan, so
Mm-hmm.
I know that you started your podcast. Like, what inspired you to create that? You know, you're in the design industry, marketing industry. What inspired you to start this?
I suck at writing.
Okay. Okay.
That's the answer. No, I mean, like in the design space, I'm trying to figure out like, how do I go about documenting my learnings, right? And I know the next time I want to go get a job, they're going to do some research on who is Dillon Winspear. And at that time, blogs were all the craze. And so the best designers were doing a great job of blogging their learnings.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just never consistent at it. I tried and tried and tried to be consistent. It would come in spurts, but I sucked at it. And
Me too. I'm not a writer.
you're the same way?
Yeah, I'd rather put me in front of a camera and I light up. I'm here.
and I like to ad lib too, and ad libbing doesn't translate to words on paper either. So like, you know, if you were to read something that as I would to talk about it, it wouldn't make any sense. Grammatically, it would be a mess. So yeah, I'm not a writer. But what I was doing is I was, you know, between my freelance and between just the networking, I was having conversations with individuals, whether they're in the creative space or in the business space. And I was like, this person's a genius. I need to document this. And that's kind of when it occurred to me, like, well, let's just throw a microphone between us and I can document it that way. And therein was born the podcast, where it was completely selfish. It was in order to get my own content documented. And that really was the birth of it. Now today, 2.5 years later, it's not the case anymore, but that is the origins of it.
So what is the purpose for it now? Like, what is your mission that you are creating it? How has it changed?
Yeah. You know what's funny? So do you listen to a lot of Joe Rogan?
Yes. He is my inspiration to start my own as well.
Was he? Did you by chance watch the Joe Rogan and Whitney Cummings podcast just like 4 days ago?
And no, I haven't caught that one yet.
It's a great episode. It's one of them that I was listening to the other day when I was sketching. The very last 10 minutes of it, you know, Whitney Cummings was just thanking Rogan for putting the podcast together because of the spotlight that Rogan has been able to give other comedians and people who wouldn't really have a voice but needed a voice. Rogan would give them that opportunity. And it kind of occurred to me, I was like, I'd love to be the Rogan of UX design.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is I think, you know, he's obviously an educated dude and very well versed in a lot of different topics. But he doesn't claim to be the smartest person in the room. And that's kind of, yeah. And that's kind of how I've always felt. It's like, I'm not the greatest UX designer, but for whatever reason, I've always been able to make friends with great designers, and to document some of their learnings is fantastic. And then, you know, the next designer comes around going like, hey, I'm trying to get into the UX design space. Where can I learn about this topic? And you know what? We're at episode 85 or 86 now. We've probably covered that topic in an episode or another. So, you know, new designers have found that they can get some introduction to a topic via the podcast. And that's really my desire at this point in time, is just to help those entry-level UX designers get their feet wet in the space and figure out where to move next. And, you know, outside of the podcast, I've got a Slack channel, and I just love connecting with designers. And, you know, just today I got a LinkedIn message saying, hey, I listened to your podcast earlier this morning. It's the very first UX podcast I've ever listened to. And those messages are my absolute favorite ones to respond to. And I get all giddy, and we'll go back and forth for 20 minutes or so, just so I can understand, like, so what are you thinking about? What's on your mind? You know, the UX field can be overwhelming at first. Like, so where are you heading?
That right there is one of your processes.
Yeah.
You know, to get into your creative zone is an investigation and asking questions, you know, in your Slack channel right there.
Yeah, exactly it. Right. And I just love, I think I'm a naturally curious person, and I like to know what drives the other. It's the same reason you're doing this podcast, right? You want to know what
Barbara Walters, though.
The Barbara Walters.
You're welcome. I do. I want to sit in that chair and be like, let's ask the hard questions.
I actually just got way more intimidated now.
That's kind of like, I don't really want to be, a teacher in a sense. I really just want to know and listen and hear people's stories. We're such
Yeah.
a connected world, and we didn't have this when we were, a lot younger. I didn't have this when I was a lot younger. When I started my career, I basically had to like figure it out. I had no help. I got thrown into the wolves, and I
Yep.
wish that there were resources that there are now, and just being able to share this, because there's so much that people, can grasp and reach and touch and learn and educate themselves. So I love that what you're doing and helping to share that for the next generation, because it wasn't always that easy.
Well, and what you're saying is a lot to do with just because of the technology that we live in today,
I
right?
know. And
And
we just missed it.
we did, we really did. And like when I was like, again, I didn't hear the term UX design until I was probably 4 years into what was a UX career.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any boot camps, there wasn't any schooling for it.
Nope.
There wasn't a whole lot of like online learnings or free courses or whatever. But now if you jump on Instagram, you will find dozens of free UX courses because people
Yeah.
are churning out content. And it's really cool. And I always say that like the UX designers who are starting today are going to be as up to speed as me within their first year or two, right? Just because they're going to be able to take it all in so quickly. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that is such a free education course and passing that to the next person.
For
What
sure.
is your biggest obstacle in your career right now? What is something that you really face on a daily basis that you would want to teach, you're teaching these younger generation, these UX designers, something that could help them, avoid a pitfall in their career as starting out?
Okay, Barbara Walters.
Dun, dun, dun.
What's funny is if you're okay with it, let me take that question in a different way. Because I actually think my biggest obstacle today is not in the UX space. The biggest
Okay.
obstacle today is in my own head. And
Which is still a huge issue for a lot of people, a lot of creatives.
100%.
Yeah.
And I've been a big advocate, and I've been very open to this, that, I've been in, this, what we call this design therapy, right? I've been in
Well,
therapy for 2.5 years. And, that's my biggest obstacle, is just figuring out how to manage what's happening inside my own head. They
yeah.
talk about imposter syndrome or design block or all these different things. And truthfully, I think they're all related to one form or another. The anxieties that you experience, the self-doubt, the confidence, like those things happen for everyone. It doesn't matter if you've been in the field for 10 days or 10 years, it still happens. And that's for sure still my biggest hurdle.
I don't think it'll ever go away. I feel like I face it at least a couple times a week. And it's being able to overcome that, and like you're saying, and finding outlets to help you, cope with it, and having therapy. Like, are there any things that you do to help, yourself outside of therapy, to, mechanisms or methods to combat that?
Outside of theory, are you talking like just how to manage like my own mental space?
So if I last week, I got to the point where there was so much going on with my work, and, I literally just had zero time for my hobby, myself, and I get home and I'm like, I'm exhausted. I feel like I can't do this. I want to shut everything down. I'm over it. I'm out. I'm out. So like, what do you do to combat that kind of thing, that mentality?
Yeah, and it's a combination, it's a blend, and I haven't found like the magic bullet to that answer yet. But like the blend for me includes, getting active. I picked up boxing a couple years ago.
Yes,
I saw that you're boxing. Are you a kickboxer? Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I got to get back into it. I haven't been in probably about maybe 5 months because of COVID.
Yep. So and I've been doing at-home boxing, and it's definitely not the same. I shadow boxed for probably the first 4 months of COVID, and then just recently I hung a full body bag in my garage, and finally getting back into it. So
you got to try kickboxing.
I don't. We'll talk about that one later.
Welcome. I love it. Like I have never felt more empowered. And like,
that's,
you know what? I can defend myself.
And that's that I think that feeling that you're describing there is part of like the confidence boost. It's not just like the physical exertion, which is good for the mental health, but it's also a confidence piece that I think comes from being able to tackle challenges. So, I do like to box. I've got a wife, I've got kids. Getting out and getting away with them helps me kind of recenter and refocus. You mentioned going on nature walks. I live in the great state of Utah, which is filled with mountains. and we get out to the mountains pretty often. And on occasion, I'll go out there by myself just to kind of recenter before I take on the next project. So, there's a variety of different things. But I found like one of the best things to help me overcome like the imposter syndrome is just to talk to other creatives, and they'll all tell you that they're battling the same thing as well. Hearing somebody like yourself saying like, oh, I face a couple times a week does more for me than probably for you. Right. And I like knowing that I'm not in this alone.
Yeah, that's exactly why I created this. It's sharing those experiences and letting people know, hey, we're real human beings. Social media is not all it's cracked up to be in the facade. And let's
Mm-hmm.
break that away and actually have a conversation that's real and authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that, some days I really freaking hate wanting to do my job, and I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do my hobbies. I just want to lay in my bed, eat my ice cream, and not talk to a single soul for 24 hours. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I'm also going to say, and on occasion, that's okay. Do it.
exactly. And
Do it.
that's like the biggest thing I want to stress to like a lot of creatives is like other people out there is that it's okay. Yeah. You take time for yourself. And if you decide that you can't, like social media is so prevalent. If you can't post for 2 weeks or a month and you need to take a break, take a break. People are
Yep.
still going to be there. They're still going to understand. They're going to understand that, I'm struggling and I need a moment for myself to revitalize and rejuvenate. For me, like in the last year, I've had to take a full on mindset shift, from a design more into like video and realigning like my priorities, because when COVID hit, I was like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I've, like I've told you earlier, I've made some big shifts in my career that are taking me down a new path. It's scary, but you know what? I'm taking that one step forward and trying is the biggest key.
100%. I just released a podcast today, and the whole premise of it was how important it is just to show up. And there's going to be
Exactly.
times where it's going to be difficult just to show up. And the whole podcast I recorded and edited at about 9 o'clock last night. And it was after I told you about my donation Red Cross spill that I had yesterday. I got home and I was like, I can't record anything. And it's going to be the first Tuesday in a year and a half that I've missed.
Yeah.
And I
Oh
was
my
going
gosh,
like,
you can take a break.
well, I know, but that's kind of when I was laying there in bed going like the room's kind of spinning. I was like, I had topics that I was going to rant about for the podcast today, and none of them made sense. And that's when it hit me like there is value in just showing up when your mind and body are giving you excuses why you shouldn't. And
Mhm.
I was very specific to call out in the podcast that grinding through it is not always the answer.
Yeah.
And, you are the one who can assess that more often than, you can assess it better than anybody else, right? If you're grinding it out more often than not, then maybe you need to reevaluate. But if, if something comes up that you planned on, you were excited about, but then in the moment your mind gave you an excuse, those are the important times where you got to show up, and you just got to, you just got to show up. And I think there's power in that.
Yeah, I love that mind. That's such a big mindset shift key for a lot of people of like learning like what really like works for them in the moment, and overcoming some of those obstacles that really have a lot of barriers on themselves. It's hard to get in there. Like for me, I know that coming out of that, and it's hard for me to like get up and always do something, and I feel like if I don't give myself a break and really understanding that I feel guilty. I feel like I shouldn't, I feel like I'm sometimes the opposite. I really have to like actually give myself a break and not feel guilty about that, because I am someone that will work until 3 o'clock in the morning and
Mm-hmm.
push myself and burn out, because I've experienced that a lot, especially in the last year.
Well, and it's interesting too, because now you've got a design therapy show, right? And unlike a freelance project, which has a beginning and an end, a show has no end. And
Exactly.
so it's very easy to say like, well, let me just get it across the finish line. But guess what? Next week, there's another finish line. And then we get that, there's another finish line. And, in the podcast world and the design therapy show world, like there's no end to this project. So you've got to be constantly monitoring and assessing, how am I doing? How am I managing?
Exactly.
Because if you burn out, everything tanks from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Burnout is too real. It's too
For
real,
sure.
prevalent in every industry, every moment. I feel like burnout happens every couple years.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to shift, like, how do you shift out of that, you know?
Yeah, it's tough. And again, I took a break from the podcast from I think like beginning of December, and then I was planning on picking it up in the beginning of January. I postponed it a little bit. February hit, and then this COVID thing was starting to take off, and I I lost my mind. Like I started getting so stressed out and so anxious about what was happening in the world that, once March was in full swing, I still hadn't started up the podcast yet, and now I'm in quarantine. I'm going like, a UX design podcast is not the most important thing in the world right now. Why am I going to start this up again? People need to focus on their family. They need to focus on their job. They need to focus on paying the bills right now. They don't need a UX podcast. So like that spiraled me even further. But again, trying to break that, take the break that you need,
And then show up.
take a breath, and then show up. Yep.
I love that. Well, what are some of your, to switch gears a little bit, what are some of
Yeah.
your artistic influences? How do you, get going back to the, how do you get inspired? Are there certain genres and people? I know I've talked a lot about, I'm very heavily influenced by retro, vintage, old,
Yeah.
anything from 1930s to 1950s. That's mine, and it shows up in my work,
Yeah.
not always necessarily in
For
like my
sure.
day-to-day work, but in my own personal work, it's there.
Yep. Yep. No, I totally get that. And I've tried to create a space that I work in that will continue to help me draw inspiration. So hopefully this background behind me tells you all those things that I draw inspiration from.
Let's see. We have a boat.
What do we got back here?
What is that, a bow?
Yep. There's a bow back there.
Wait, and I can't see what that little gold statue is.
That right there.
Yes. Ding, ding, ding.
That's Ganesh from the
yep.
time I visited India. I was working with a development team in India for a few weeks. And, that's, again, just kind of a memoir to that. Over here, I feel like, what's the,
Vanna.
yeah, that's what, Vanna White.
Come on down.
Exactly. Over here, I've got a handful of penny boards, skateboards that I built a couple summers ago.
That looks like a curtain.
Oh,
That's an illusion. Looks like a curtain. Well, there it is. Okay, those are the boards.
Yep. So I've got the penny boards, I got snowboards, I've got ships. I love the ocean. I love the water.
That makes sense. I see that.
So you see the ocean behind me. I've got bottles or jars of sand from all the beaches we've ever visited.
That's amazing.
So those are just the types of things that I try and create a space that I'm constantly inspired by. I've got 5 older brothers, and most of them grew up in Southern.
Youngest?
No, I've actually got a younger brother as well.
Okay.
So I'm like squeezing there right at the tail end. But my 5 older brothers, a handful of them got to grow up in Southern California. I got the short end of the stick and grew up in Minnesota, but I was heavily influenced by Southern California, like skateboard punk culture.
Yeah.
And so all things board sports, I've got up here, I've got, surfer magazines and snowboard magazines, and, they're super old. They're from like 5 years ago, but just like, again, you bust them open just to get inspiration. You got the same?
No. You said that's old.
It's old.
Mid-century ads from the 1950s. You don't know what's old.
Well, and see that's gotten past the old stage where it's like it's old and now it's cool again. Whereas a lot of things in those magazines are like 90s, early 2000s, and not quite cool again yet.
I have a 90s book over here of graphic design.
That's awesome. So again, like I try and create a creative space in which I can draw inspiration from. So all these things that I've surrounded myself in this room with are where I'll.
Does it show up in your work? Do you actually see it like kind of sneak in here and there? Because I know for me, I'm an ultra minimalism. I like a lot of space. I like a lot of breathing room. And I like a little bit of kitschiness. So you see a lot of that 50s influence show up. Sometimes in my work, I'm like, ooh, sometimes I have to like pull it out and be like, okay, that's not what we're vibing here for. That's not what the user experience needs to be. But do you ever see kind of it sneak in?
Oh, 100% it does sneak in. I think I am drawn to like heavy lines, bold colors, sharp edges or corners. Like those are the types of things that you would see in a surf magazine or a skate magazine. I think I am drawn to that naturally. I do think I've kind of rounded myself out. So a few things that you've touched on, I also draw inspiration from. And, I do have design you know, I don't want to call them mentors because I don't have a mentor relationship, but I do have design heroes who I draw from them as well. Aaron Draplin is a design
I've
hero
seen
of
him
mine.
speak like 3 or 4 times here in Nashville. He's amazing and he's hilarious.
And I've actually seen him speak 4 times as well. Just this last year was number 4. I've
In
got a hat.
Nashville?
No. I wish. I haven't been to
Oh,
Nashville.
I know. I
No,
saw your hat. I saw your
yeah.
post.
Okay. So the hat up there, that's Aaron Draplin hat. I've got his book right on my shelf here. And, you know, he too has like very bold, thick lined style. And, you know, I am drawn to that. The funny thing that you brought up though, that I had to share this story is I was designing a logo for our internet marketing agency 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this idea in my head. The company, don't laugh. The company was called Get Found First. GFF. It's a really cool.
Sounds like a good early 2000s.
That's exactly what it was. It was 2005, 2007 internet marketing agency.
Yeah.
So Get Found First. I came up with this logo just at night going like, if I could do a G and the tail of that G was like an up into the right arrow, that could be a pretty cool little icon. And I drew it out and I loved it. And I showed it to the guys at work and they loved it. And we rebranded that week. It just caught on fire. It was about a month after that. I was looking at the logo on paper and the paper on my desk was turned sideways. And I realized that I drew the Burton logo on the side. The Burton, the snowboard company, a B with an arrow. And I was like, that's exactly what I did. It is the Burton logo on its side.
Did you have to go back and like start all over? You just didn't tell me like, no.
They still have it today.
Oh my gosh. Did you be like, so I accidentally made your logo look like somebody else?
But that's, again, it was like, it was so subliminal. And it was just like my passions seeped right on through to the design.
Again, I love that. That's such a funny example of like, you know, how our subconscious works and, you know, how we're in such an industry of everything is so subliminally like messaged and getting like a user or somebody to click that next button to, you know, make that purchase or get that service or subscription. And it's so subtle how our brain, I wish we could like unlock our brain to like full capacity.
100%. I totally agree.
I think we'd be at past Mars by now if we unlocked our brain.
Yeah, and we'd probably be rid of COVID as well. We wouldn't be in quarantine.
We would have had it done in a day. We'd be like, oh, that wasn't a big deal.
We'd be doing this podcast in person in Nashville.
Exactly. And honky tonk it up.
That sounds good to me.
Here's the big question. Do you have a pair of cowboy boots that you can wear here?
So I don't.
Well, we can take you to the store and get you some.
I do have a cowboy hat though. And I do play the harmonica.
You know what? You just got a couple of cool points. There you go.
Is that so? Utah's got its own little Western cowboy. I don't think it's Nashville cowboy though. I definitely think it's its own cowboy.
Like gold rushy cowboy, right? Where gold mining.
Yep. So we've got a cabin up in the mountains, and every time we go up in the mountains, it's like it's only natural. I'm driving my truck up in the mountains. I got to throw on the hat. I got to have the harmonica, and I've got to play some country music. I'm not even a country music fan, but it fits in that moment.
I live in Nashville, Tennessee, the music capital of the world, and I hate country.
Can you say that out loud in Nashville?
Yes, I can, and I will. I think the majority of Nashville gets its rep from a lot of the tourists. They come here in the cowboy boots and the cowboy hats, thinking that we all wear those every single day, and we don't.
That's funny.
We're actually a very cool, eclectic, creative city. So, fun fact about Nashville.
Once we get out of quarantine, I'll have to go experience that.
Yeah, bring the whole family. We'll go down to the honky tonk and get you all cowboy boots.
That sounds great to me, actually.
I love it. Well, I have a couple of more questions for you.
Yeah.
And I always love to ask this from everyone. If you had like an ultimate dream project, you know, unlimited budget, unlimited resources, people, places, things to be in the world, what would your dream project be for you?
You know what's funny is, and I thought I should probably prep for that because I've heard you ask that question on past episodes. So I was like, I should probably prep for that answer, and I didn't. And now it's going to bite me in the butt. I know. Okay, so off the cuff, what do I think of? I told you how much I love working in the board sport industry. So I think
Right?
something,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I think something in the snowboard space would be a fun project. A client like Burton would be a dream come true for me.
What is
I've got a
what's
friend.
that place that you can go snowboarding? Is it Vail or no? Up. What's that snowboarding city or like going skiing in the
Like
winter?
Aspen or Vail,
Aspen.
but you're naming Colorado cities. Utah is the land of snow here.
I'm sorry. I don't
So
know.
no, I would
I don't.
not go to Colorado to snowboard or ski. I would stay right here in this state because that's where we got it.
Well, you have to tell me a city because I don't do the cold. I used to
Park City.
snowboard Park City. Oh, I've actually
You know
heard of
Park
that.
City.
Yeah.
Park City is a fantastic town, right? So
Okay, Park
anyway,
City.
yeah,
Location.
yeah.
Okay.
Park City's a cool place. But yeah, working for like a Burton would be really fun. I Working for an Elon Musk on a project would also be really fun because I
I
like
think
that
even part of
eccentric.
the project, he's going to collaborate with you. We have unlimited resources here.
Okay, so Elon Musk is going to come in on a snowboard that's going to shoot flames out the back and take you to space at the same time. That's probably a dream project.
Yes, I love it.
And I don't know what role I'm going to play in this project, but I am in 100%.
You're going to help design the product.
Sure, with my vast knowledge of space travel on a snowboard.
Well, he does a lot of electric too, so I'm making it very eco-friendly and more of like testing it for users, helping him test it, the products.
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever been in a Tesla?
Yes, I've driven one. It's amazing.
It is, right? I mean, like, again, you're talking about like, where do we draw inspiration from? You sit in a Tesla and it's unlike any other vehicle you've ever sat in.
I've never had a car drive me. I was so scared. And the guy was like, "Let it go," and I was like, "No, you're joking." And because you can only do it on the highway. It's only about 40 miles an hour, I think. And
Yep.
you get on the highway, and I started driving, and he's like, "Let go of the steering wheel." And I let it go. I was so scared. I was like, "What is this? This is like some futuristic stuff. I don't know." The robots are taking over my life.
You know what? But if the robots want to take over driving me around, I am so game for that.
I got used to it. After we were driving for about 30 minutes, I was like, "This is pretty nice."
For sure. My commute, well, back when I commuted, my commute to work was 7 minutes. I would have a robot drive me 7 minutes because that's how much I hate driving.
I do too. I'm not a fan of it. If I have to drive anywhere over 30 minutes, I'm not a very happy camper.
Oh, 100%. And my back's hurting and I feel like I'm 60 years old and I'm just complaining about sitting in a car for over 30 minutes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. Well, we're gonna have to make that project come to fruition. So we're gonna call.
That was probably
Elon
that was the lamest answer you've gotten on any show yet.
No, this is what you're gonna aspire to. So in a couple of years, I'm gonna see that you're at least gonna have him maybe on one of your episodes.
Oh yeah, we'll get Musk on a podcast episode. That's gonna happen for sure.
Goals.
That's right. Yep.
Just like I'm gonna have Oprah Winfrey on my episode, and I'm gonna interrogate her. I'm just kidding.
Interrogator like Barbara Walters would.
Barbara Walters.
Uh-huh.
I gotta get the look down. I gotta get the chair. I gotta get the right chair and sit across from me with some music and a spotlight.
She's an intimidating person.
I know.
I don't see that in your personality though.
Okay, maybe not as intense, but from the same persona perspective, maybe a little bit of Chris Voss in there too on the investigation side.
Who's Chris Voss?
He is an investigator. He's a top investigator. He's helped with a lot of things in Afghanistan and catching a lot of major criminals in the world. So look him up on Masterclass. He's amazing.
Okay, sounds good.
He's really good at helping you understand the human psyche of, when you're talking to somebody and understanding, like, ultimately somebody's looking for a benefit for themselves and understanding, like, their voice and the value of, like, what they're trying to answer in themselves and learning how to interpret that and also being able to have that conversation that helps elevate that to the next question.
The more you know. That's cool. I'll have to look into it.
The more you know. What book? That's a TV show. The more you know.
The more you know. I actually don't know where this is from. Yeah, the more you know.
Well, the last thing I would love for you to leave everybody with
Yeah.
is, what is some advice would you give to some other creatives? It can be in your industry or any industry. Like, what do you want to leave them with to advice that can help them in their career and their path?
Yeah. There's a lot of answers. I've asked that question to creatives on my podcast, and I've gotten a lot of answers that do resonate. But I think for me, the answer I would share with you is never stop learning. You know, the end of education is a finish line that you should never cross. And, 10 years into the field, I feel like I'm still brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I meet UX designers who have just finished their 13-week boot camp, and they feel like they've arrived at the pinnacle of UX design. And I'm going like,
Got
you have
it.
no idea what you're not even seeing yet.
Yeah.
And when I see that person, I'm big into like interpersonal skills. And when I see that attitude of like, I've got this confidence, and there's kind of a blind arrogance to it. Like, it's the biggest turnoff for me. So the person who can demonstrate this attitude of like, I'm always learning, even in my losses, I can learn something. It's the humility. It's that
Amen.
growth
Preach.
mindset. Yeah, like it's those are the types of things that I think are super important for anyone early in the field, because again, you jump in and your vision of what that field is so narrow that you don't know what's over here yet. And the longer you get into it, the more you'll realize like, oh yeah, I was pretty ignorant early on in my career. So just recognize that you are ignorant early in your career. And so therefore always be learning. Seek good mentors, seek good education, read good books, do all those things, listen to good podcasts, jump on Design Therapy and
Yes.
devour all the episodes.
Jump on and design today.
Because those are the types of things that I think will just continue to train your mind to always be learning.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Well, everyone take notes, because that is some amazing advice that I think every one of us learns at some point in our career, whether it's early or later. We all grasp that. And, I've learned that maybe like 4 years into my career. I was like, oh, I don't know everything. And it's being humble. It's being really humble about it.
You know what's funny is I go to Adobe Max. I've been Adobe Max 3 or 4 times now. And every year I go, I walk away battling this idea of like, I'm super inspired by all these creatives I've just met and saw. And on the other side, like, I'm super behind.
I feel the same way.
And I think it's a healthy balance. If you're despair like the whole way, then that's probably not healthy. But like, it's just awe-inspiring to realize like there are so many skilled creatives out there. And, somebody who does photography, I can take principles that they're talking about and apply to UX design, and so again, I'll go back to where we started. When you seek to be inspired is where you'll find your inspiration. And so you can find that in any industry.
Gosh, well, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I've learned so much about you, and I can't wait to continue to have like conversations with you and continue to learn about your career and see like where we both go in the whole community. Thank you for joining me on this episode.
Absolutely. I'm disappointed that our time's already up. So if you want to do this again in the future, let me know.
We're going to have to, because I feel like we could have 3 or 4 more episodes of content that we hadn't even touched on.
Oh, we're scratching the surface, right?
That barely.
Barely. Yeah, we've got all this Nashville stuff to talk about still.
I mean, we're going to have to do a whole video downtown, so.
That sounds great.
It's a whole culture in itself, and you're going to be shocked.
Well, and if you bring up Colorado skiing again, we might not be doing another podcast.
I'm so sorry.
Utah is where it's at.
I will have to get better, because I haven't gone skiing in probably 15 years, 20 years.
Is that something you enjoy?
Obviously
not enough to do it again.
I don't like cold weather.
Then you haven't found what you enjoy doing in cold weather.
No. I'm athletic. I love skiing. I love water skiing. I love snow skiing. I just hate the cold. When you fall down and your face is in the cold, it's awful.
Then you're not wearing the right clothing.
Okay, maybe that might be it.
I am a strong proponent for it, because we get here, my wife, she hates winter too. And I'm going like, well, it's because you haven't found something that you love doing in the winter. She says, no, I hate the cold. I was like, well, then let's get a new jacket. Like, that's shouldn't be the reason that you hate 6 months out of the year. I'm
on the same page with her. I'm like, you can't convince me. I'm not there yet.
All right. Well, get your good gear. Let's have this quarantine end. Maybe 2021, you head out here to Utah. We'll do some snowmobiling, some snowboarding, and you'll like winter. It's not that bad.
Okay. That sounds like a plan. Okay. Well, let everybody know where they can find you, how you subscribe, all things design today.
Yeah, so I am just getting my feet wet in the Instagram world. So you can find me on Instagram at designed.today. More regularly, I post my stuff to YouTube. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And then the podcast Design Today can be found on all the magical podcasting apps. So it should be pretty easy to find. I've got a website, designtoday.com. Again, if you're interested in UX design, I've got a free course available for early stage UX designers. I've got coaching options available. But the coolest thing I think about the Design Today community is our Slack channel, because there's a ton of hungry UX designers that are in there just giving input and helping each other out and, lifting people up. And that's really fun.
We'll have to share all those links in the description below. So be on the lookout for that. You can scroll down and click on any of those, and we'll have those available and ready for you. Thank you again so much for joining us on this episode. Make sure that you are following and subscribing All Things The Design Therapy on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and also on my website at thedesigntherapy.co. I appreciate you. Make sure that you stay tuned for the next episode. We'll see you around. Bye.
Thanks, Cassie. We'll see ya.